Finally, after months of waiting, we've actually had some interesting story progression and not some inane side story with next to no interaction with any of the characters involved. Buckle up, kids, it's full steam ahead to Jupiter. So, what exactly does this juicy little slice of story have to offer us after this immense fictional famine? And yes, I'm ignoring Wolf of Saturn 6, because all we really learned from that was why radio is a dying medium. Noranite. I mean, poor Ordis has a volume slider and he's not even half as annoying as her. Dated references to cult classics aside, we asked and DE did indeed deliver, just enough to keep us fed up until the new war. The first of our discoveries comes from dear old mum herself. Lotus is back, and it looks to be that she's gone over to the other side completely. Mumsy shares some little details like Hunhao originally being some kind of agricultural drone and the sentient mother being a carpenter, more likely alluding to her status as a builder of ships, structures, or maybe even sentients themselves. I mean, if we want to be literal here, it'd be lame if it turned out the sentient rebellion was down to the lack of demand for the woodwork industry in Tau. Hey, it might hold some weight. I hear gold's in right now. Speaking of which, we also got given a breadcrumb as to what actually happened to spark off the old war, and boy is it a doozy if it turns out to be true. Rather than some outside intervention, Lotus talks about the long journey to Tau simply giving the sentients enough time to develop, well, sentience, i.e. creativity, pride, and a will to live. Which, of course, the Orokin were apparently none too happy about. Supposedly we've been fed a lie all this time, and the Orokin were actually the aggressors, attempting to destroy the drones before they could develop further. Now, Lotus was conceived as a mimic to infiltrate and swallow the pitch eggs of their war machine, before being captured and reprogrammed somehow to work against the sentients. Weird cuckoo metaphors aside, this sort of shit is in keeping with the Orokin's laundry list of terrible ideas, but it has got me thinking. Warning, conjecture incoming! What if the way the Orokin took control of Natar was by implanting her sentient body with the recently disintegrated Margulis's, for lack of a better word, soul, or Oro, which is a concept we've heard in Warframe before? This would definitely explain why Balance would go so far as to defect to the sentient side. He genuinely might have had good reason to believe that he could save Margulis because she literally is rattling around in Natar's head. Conjecture over, you can all roll your eyes now. Mind you, overall, the Orokin being the aggressors here seems a little bit screwy in my opinion. Now, I could believe that they might have bottled out their plan out of fear of this escalating into the robot rebellion and attempted to destroy their progeny before it got out of hand, but that doesn't sit right in the old noggin. They were desperate enough to go this far in the first place, and the alternative of their populace exhausting all the resources in the Origin system wasn't exactly a viable option to fall back on for the long term. This stinks of somebody manipulating events from behind the scenes, deceiving both the Orokin and the sentients into fighting each other, and I think at this point we have a fairly good idea of who that might be. This next one is also a big one. Lotus makes it explicitly clear that the sentients are aware and she personally has heard from Wally, i.e. the man in the freaking wall. If Wally has been talking to the sentients, then who knows what other pies he's been getting his creepy little fingers into. He may even have orchestrated this whole conflict in the first place. It might be a reach because the sentients clearly despise the Void and everything related to it, but if I learned anything from 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, it's that there are many ways to manipulate people. That, and that just because you adapted a book series into the largest television saga of the last decade doesn't mean you're a good writer. Moving on from all these half-truths and unanswered questions, we have the meat of the update in the form of Alad V stepping back into the limelight. Salad has been a very busy bee, cooking up some new Corpus Proxy sentient hybrids called Amalgams, which, frankly, for the most part, look ridiculous. As it turns out, if you collect the fragments scattered around Jupiter, you discover that old Alad was simply looking for a way to get back into the Corpus Board of Directors good books, after Nef Anyo turned their heads with all his spicy little shenanigans on Venus. Huh. I guess wildly unsafe terraforming experiments and slave colonies are the Corpus equivalent of showing a bit of leg. It all started when Alad was approached by an old colleague he'd long thought dead named Regus, who offered him the opportunity to share in some old war tech that he'd managed to acquire. Alad, as much a greedy arsehole as ever, sought to take advantage of Regus despite his suspicion that this was too good to be true, and dove headfirst into a deal to make him filthy rich and win him some brownie points with the board. Unfortunately for Alad, it becomes apparent that the Regus he knew is long gone, and the man he's been dealing with is but a sentient mimic with one goal: to enlist the aid of the Corpus to create a new breed of sentient unfettered by its predecessor's weaknesses by testing them against the Tenno and their multitude of void powers. I think it's quite interesting that it turned out to be Alad and not Neff who made the amalgams, considering what we found in the labs on Venus, but yeah, there you go. To keep Alad from simply backing out, the Sentients dispatched a type of flying drone called a Ropalolist to shriek and flap and shoot lasers and generally be a nuisance to anyone within its proximity if Alad didn't comply. My granddad owned a bird, and if you swap out lasers for something else, in my experience I can confirm that's pretty much all they do. Granted, Eric never took down a floating fortress in the atmosphere of Jupiter, but given half the chance, I wouldn't have put it past him. And so, Alad was blackmailed under threat of exposure and a giant burb wrecking his house into creating the amalgams out of existing corpus tech and parts provided by the Sentients. If Alad were to be found out, he'd be executed for treason, but I do have to wonder what's stopping anyone from looking out the window and seeing, oh, I don't know, maybe the colossal sentient carrier looming ominously in the distance? Oh, sorry, I forgot we were talking about Warframe. You can't move for plot holes around here. Either way, the road to the new war seems to be fast approaching, with Lotus talking some serious smack and the sentient forces creeping their way almost unnoticed into the solar system. Really, you'd think people might have recognised the giant robots that almost destroyed civilization poking their heads in for a quick reconnoitre. If one thing's for certain, I seriously doubt they'll go unseen for much longer. Subject to any imminent delays, of course. Good morning, afternoon, evening and or night to all of you lovely people out there. Sorry it's been a bit of a dry spell lately, gonna put that down to some uninteresting story from the last few months, but this video is a little experiment to see if I can't expedite my content creation a little bit. I always feel like I need to condense all the lore into singular videos so they have like the longest shelf life, as it were, but I'm coming to accept that with a constantly evolving game like Warframe, I'm always gonna get those comments years later of people correcting information I couldn't possibly have had at the time. This is going to be the first of a new, more loose series that will be more reactionary than me waiting to get the whole story. I'll still be doing the larger lore frames, and I plan to do some updated version of the core story videos to patch the holes, but this will kind of fill the gaps in the meantime as a quicker to produce more disposable video. Hopefully you guys won't immediately despise this new format. As usual, if you guys enjoyed the video, you can boot the like button, or if you'd be interested in seeing more of my inane bullshit, you can subscribe for hopefully increasingly regular updates. As ever, you lovely nerds, I've been Luke, this has been Loreframe, and you have been alright, I guess. Till next time, you kings and queens of patience.